Hello everyone, welcome back to our third virtual wine tasting with Vincent Arroyo Family Winery. I'm Matt Moy, the winemaker here. We've been doing these installments for the last 2 weeks. This will be our third one. So today I want to take you guys out to our Albright Ranch, which is behind me here. Albright Ranch was bought by Vince and Marjorie in the mid-70s. Originally this property was pears. So prior to grapes being on this property, they were growing pears. And if you look back, a lot of the areas around here, they were growing other things besides grapes in the late 60s, early 70s. And there were grapes, prunes, and pears, and walnuts, and other things. So, but now the best use and value of the land is in grapes. So we are looking right now at some Malbec. Our Malbec is one of our Bordeaux varietals. If you go to Bordeaux, France, as many of you might have been there, they grow 5 different reds. Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. So Malbec is actually not from Argentina like a lot of people think it is. It's actually from France, but a lot of it that you drink today probably does come from Argentina. So they make some really good stuff down in Mendoza. But at any rate, we're going to talk about our Malbec. The Malbec behind me here is a component in our Bodega blend. So Bodega is our chocolate lab. Many of you have visited the winery and met her. She's been here for 15 years, and she makes a blend here. And her blend is the Bodega blend of Cab, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. So the Malbec that you see here is about 45% in the current vintage. That's the 2017. Malbec for me is a really big, bold red that gives, for me, a really good mouthfeel, juiciness to the wine, versus the Cabernet has that more dry flavor. So I think with the Malbec, with other Malbec, you see a little more fruit. You do see a lot of color in our Malbec. It's very dark. This particular Malbec is special because it was put in here the year that my second son, Grayson, was born. And we're going to move over to the next vineyard next door where he has his Cabernet growing. I introduced you to Collins Cab last week, which is growing on the winery property. And then, of course, at the end, our last segment that we'll do over on the Grand Street Ranch, you'll see our Oliver's Cab. So all 3 boys do have Cab that was planted the year they were born by Vince. And maybe someday we'll see a blend of those 3. But right now we have the Bodega blend that we're seeing here. Let's go ahead and check out the grapes themselves. As you can see here, let's see, there we are. So the grapes still, like I said last week, have not started to bloom yet. And then actually what's good right now is the fact that we've seen over an inch of rain in the last couple days. This is not normal. The last 2 episodes you saw me sweating on the screen, and now we have rain. And fortunately, like I say, the grapes have not yet started to bloom, so the flowers are still safe from being damaged by the wetness. And so we're hoping this storm system will probably move away in the next couple days. And hopefully by the end of next week, early the following week, we might start seeing some bloom, which will then tell us the potential of how much fruit we're actually going to see out here in the vineyards. So right now, again, we are getting ready for that bloom to happen. They're still suckering out in the vineyards, so they just must have suckered this particular vineyard a couple days ago. And as far as the winery is concerned, everyone is still doing well. We're getting the tasting room prepped. Hopefully, like I said before, we're crossing our fingers for early June opening. And I think when I do my episode with the Lone Tree Ranch next week, I'll actually do a little tour of the winery to show you what we're doing to keep everyone safe when they come and visit us. So we're working on that right now. David and Teddy are there right now, and Amy, and we're doing our thing and getting it done and crossing our fingers to see all you back here at the winery. But as far as we're doing today, we're going to do this virtual tasting. So let's start off with our 2017 Bodega. Okay, so here we are. This is going to be the 2017 Bodega. You can see she has her little paw prints on the label there. Bodega, actually, it means winery in Spanish. So if you go to Spain, where the royal family's from, our winery today would be called Bodega de Arroyo, which is the winery of Arroyo. A lot of it means storage place in Spanish, but again, like the wineries in Spain are called bodegas. Some of you live in the big cities. The bodega is like the corner store. So People would say, why would you name your dog like a 7-Eleven? And I say, well, actually, the original name for Bodega came from where my wife and I got married, which is over in Bodega Bay on the coast here in California. So it seemed fitting as my wife gave Bodega to me as our wedding gift to name our first blend together after her, and her name was Bodega. And so that's where the name comes from, but it pays homage to the Arroyo family coming from Spain as well. So it kind of fits a lot of little segments there. But anyways, let's pour some of this wine. This is going to be, let's see, the 17 is the 45% Cab, 45% Malbec, 10% Petit Verdot. The alcohol is 13.3%. So like I said earlier, in earlier segments, we try to keep the alcohols in the 13 range. Sometimes they get a little ahead of us because of the fact that we dry farm, so the sugars spike before we can get the grapes off the vines. But if we can keep our wines at 13, you'll find that they pair really well with food. And in fact, the Bodega blend is one of those wines that you will find that are very, very good with food. So let's try this out here. Oh, very good. We use French oak for the aging of these three components that are in this wine. And I get that vanilla toastiness I see from the barrels coming out in this particular wine here. It has a very good mouthfeel. I think that's that Malbec coming out. It's drinking really well right now, but I think this wine too, give it 2 or 3 more years, I think it's going to get much better than what it is now. But I wouldn't trade this wine for anything right now. We talked about earlier too about identifying the grapes by their leaves. So what I did was I went and grabbed one of our Cabernet leaves, and right now you can see the leaves of the Malbec. They're pretty big. They're pretty big leaves. This is in comparison, this is the Cabernet leaf. So you can see by looking at the leaves, the varietals are going to be different looking in the foliage. And so that's kind of how you are able to go out into the vineyard and identify grapes before they start turning color, or before even the grapes are formed. Like I showed you earlier with those little nodules there, they'll be turning into blooms in the next couple weeks. Once bloom is over, then we have what we call set. And that's when the grapes will start to grow. And then the next step after that, as they continue to grow, they'll start to change color, which is called veraison. And veraison is going to typically happen for us late July, early August, maybe mid-July. We've seen a change. Climate change is definitely happening. And for us, we're seeing it in our grapes in terms of how early they're ripening and how early we are picking, which for us personally, it's actually been somewhat of a good thing because we're able to get all of our grapes in before the rain season starts. And so, 15 years ago, we would be picking maybe even into November. And at that point, you're running the risk of rain, and with rain comes rot. So for us to get our grapes off the vine before the rainy season starts is a good thing. The challenge for us with this global climate change is the heat. And so we dry farm, so we don't have any water for our grapes. So we want to make sure we want them to stress, but we don't want them to overstress and turn into raisins. So we try our best to balance that out. And this particular vineyard is usually picked in early October. So the Malbec usually comes in about that time. And then we'll put it into, after it's fermented, it goes into French oak for the first year of aging before we make the blend of the Bodega in the second year. Then sees another year of oak and then released with the wines. So that's our Bodega. We will go over to our Cabernet and talk about that next. And we'll see you soon. Okay, here we are in the Cabernet. This is a Grayson's Cabernet. This was planted in 2011. That's the year Grayson, my second son, was born. Previous to this planting, there was some Petite Syrah in here. It got to a point where the age was old and it wasn't producing as much fruit as we'd like it to do, and so that's when we converted it over to Petite Syrah. Cabernet. And when Vincent and Marjorie bought this ranch in the mid-70s, they planted varietals. We had Chenin Blanc on one parcel over here, and then there was we put some Petite Syrah. So the original Petite Syrah, unfortunately, lived its life and has gone on, and now Cabernet is here in its place. Like I said earlier, this is a component of the Bodega blend, and so Grayson does a good job of making some good cab that produces a good blend in the Bodega. But we have, I think this parcel here is about 2 to 3 acres of cab. So it's not a lot, but it's a younger cab, and I think we anticipate to see more grapes coming out of it in the coming years. Like I say, maybe eventually it might see a blend with his brothers, but we'll see where that goes. But again, we're drinking some bodega. It's tasting pretty good right now. Hope you're enjoying some bodega at home as well. And we'll go over to the last part of the ranch, which is going to be our Petite Syrah. And we'll meet you over there. Okay, so here we are over at our Petite Syrah. This is we refer to this as the AL2 block, so the Albright number 2. This particular block sees primarily goes into our Winemaker Reserve Petite Syrah. As many of you know, we make 4 Petite Syrahs at Vincent Arroyo Family Winery, and the Reserve Petite Syrah is very similar in how we do the Cab Winemaker Reserve, in the sense that it's barrel aged for 3 years. So what happens is, like I said in earlier episodes, is that when we harvest our fruit, each block is harvested separately. It's fermented separately, and then put it in a barrel separately. So right now, if you were to go into the winery barrel room, we probably have about 35, maybe 40 different wines aging from the 2019 vintage. And then come January, we'll sit down and taste all those different blocks, and that's how we make our blends. So the very first wine, in fact, that we make at the winery is going to be the reserve wines, because we're trying to make them our best. Our single vineyards are always single vineyards, so you're not going to have any blend there. But with the blends, we want our reserve wines to be the best we can with them. So with Petite Syrah, what we'll do is we'll taste all those blocks. I think that we have about 6 or 7 Petite Syrah blocks that we have to choose from. And then we'll taste them, and we'll smell them, and we'll figure out what we like about different blocks, and then we'll put it together. And so for our reserve wine, once we put that together, it goes back in the barrel for 2 more years. So it sees 3 years of aging. And like the Cab Reserve, it sees 2 brand new oak barrels during the aging process. So after that first year, we blend it. We have made our Reserve Petite. We'll go and buy brand new American oak barrels. We'll make about 20 barrels, I think, of the reserve. And then in the 3rd year of aging, we order another 20 new barrels and put it in new barrels then. So it sees over 200% brand new oak during the aging. So it sees a lot of oak. Nice thing about Petite Syrah, it can handle American oak. American oak's pretty intense in terms of flavor, a lot of tannin in there. And like I said with the Greenwood Ranch in our last episode, when you get a Petite Syrah, it's like a rock, and with the tannins that are in there. And you take that really high tannic American oak and you rub them together, and you basically polish it up. And that's what we're doing with our Petite Syrah and the American oak, is we're polishing it in the barrel to give to you guys to drink. And so Petite Syrah, this again is still not blooming yet. It will hopefully in a couple weeks. The one thing we have to worry about Petite Syrah is they're very tight clusters. And so when the berries fully develop, it's like a wedge. It's all tightened up in the bunch. Whereas if you were to look at Cabernet, they're loose berries, so they're hanging in a loose cluster. Whereas Petite Syrah is very tight. So the issue running with Petite Syrah is moisture. If you were to get a rain right before harvest, the water will get inside the bunch, and then it has no way of drying out. Whereas as rain falls on Cabernet, it's loose, so the wind will basically dry it out. So you have less risk of rot. Whereas Petite Syrah, if you get water, it's going to start to rot from the inside. So sometimes you end up having to pick this varietal if you end up in a rainstorm earlier than you would like, because you'd run the risk of it rotting on the vine itself. With Petite Syrah, another characteristic is going to be that dark color. Many wineries use this varietal for blending in terms of trying to darken their wines. Vince will like to say there's a lot of good Zins out there, and the reason they're good Zins is because they have a little bit of Petite Syrah on them. That's used as a color attribute, so sometimes they will use to darken it. But at any rate, let's try some of the Petite Syrah Winemaker Reserve. It's going to be the 2016. Like I said earlier, the reserves are barrel aged for 3 years, so this was released in last fall. So some of you probably have this in your wine cellar. It is the 2016 Winemaker Reserve Petite Syrah. We did about 20 barrels. This was a little bit higher alcohol, so we got in the 14 range. But like I said in the Malbec section, sometimes with dry farming, you don't have the option of putting water on the grapes when it gets to be a hot day. And so when the grapes go into distress, they look for water. And the only water at that point in the game, especially for our grapes, because we don't have any irrigation, is in the berries. So what they'll do is they'll go into the berry to pull water out, and then when they do that, the sugar then goes higher because there's less water inside the berries, so you have a higher concentration of sugar. So that's kind of what happens in terms of alcohols, and how sometimes they can get away from you because the idea that we can't put drip irrigation, or we choose not to use drip irrigation in our vines, so we can't alleviate that stress when we see 100-degree days in October. So this is going to be our Winemaker Reserve Petite Syrah. Again, this is one of those aromatics like we had on the Cabernet Reserve, where you really smell that oak with that 200%. I get a cedar maybe more smell to it. Another smooth wine. This wine in particular, I think, is one of those wines that when you buy from us, it's usually good right out the chute. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it had that extra year of aging, so you didn't have to put it in your wine cellar and sell it for another year like maybe our regular Petite Syrah, whereas this is good right out the chute. And I think it does have some ageability. I know, I think I drank a 2008 or 2009 a couple weeks ago. It was just phenomenal. So, and Petite Syrah does have some good ageability. People often think Cab is the one you want to age, but I think Petite Syrah can hang its hat just as long as Cab can. But different years are different years, and sometimes they don't hold off as long. So I'd say my good drinking age for most of our wines, and including this wine, is probably 7 to 10 years after release. So if you have the patience and you can hide the wine from yourself, I think it's a good wine to do that with. But again, if you're looking for something to drink right out of release, I think this is that go-to wine. I think this is going to go with your T-bone steak, filet mignon. I think this is it's going to pair really well with meat. I just think that's what Petite Syrah is made for. So hopefully you guys are having some dinner or lunch, and maybe that steak sandwich is tasting good with a little bit of our Petite Syrah. But at any rate, I am going to head back to the winery. I appreciate you guys listening today to my presentation, and hopefully you learned a little bit about our Albright Ranch. It is a special place because, like I say, the grapes, Grayson's cabs over here, as well as Bodega's components, so it has some meaning to my life. But we'll see you guys again next Friday. Hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. We're doing our best here, and we will hopefully see you guys next Friday, where we see the Lone Tree Ranch. And like I said before, I'll try to do a little bit of filming of our winery so you can see what precautions we're doing, so that when we do open up, you'll be able to come and visit us and feel safe, just as well as our employees being safe as well. So you guys enjoy your weekend. Thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, like I say, shoot me an email, matt@vincentarroyo.com, or give the winery a call, and we'll be able to help you out. Our library is still open, so feel free to get online, check out some of these wines. Some of those reserve Petite Syrahs are out there, that older vintages that you might want to try, that we can get out to you. Fortunately, the weather's cool this week, so we can still get wines out all across the country. But again, that'll start to limit as we go closer to summer. So if you are thinking about those bottles that you see on our site, don't wait to pull the trigger. Go ahead and give us a call or get online and put those in your cart and enjoy them. So cheers to the weekend, and we'll see you next Friday at the Lone Tree Ranch, which you can actually see the Lone Tree there. So there's a preview. We'll see you soon.